Record.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we look to provide new insights in sanction risk management around emerging trends. My name is Neil Marshall, and I'm the Partner Manager and Data Screening Specialist at FinScan. I'm delighted to introduce to you Steve Marshall, Head of our FinScan Advisory Services, and Kieran Holland, Head of our Technical Solutions at FinScan. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
My first question, Steve, perhaps, what are the most consequential aspects of building technology into the sanctions screening process?
Well, thank you, Neil. I think two of the most consequential aspects of technology in the sanctions space really need to start out addressing the staggeringly high number of false positives that are produced, and also the need to be able to effectively monitor the resolution of those alerts, particularly in an environment like we're in today, which is a highly remote, if not solely remote environment. In terms of the generation of false positives, there's been a lot of work done around layering machine learning applications, for example, on top of alert generation systems, those systems being really rules-based type systems. And those machine learning programs are set to either auto decision in some cases or to provide a recommendation about the resolution of the alerts. I really need to ask the question, though, is why would we want to continue generating such a high number of alerts to begin with, and adding that layer of complexity on top of systems by having a machine learning application try to help out? Why would we not want to just build a system that was intelligent from the get-go and diminish the number of false positives from the start? In terms of the administration of the alert resolution process, we really need to be learning from our experience during this pandemic, namely that the new norm is going to be around working remotely, having low density in terms of staff in various locations. So we needed to look at how do we effectively administer the system that not only incorporates processes and controls that are supported by and ensure compliance with internal policies and procedures, but that also begin to change the way we've managed in the past. We need to look at establishing, let's say, for example, daily goals for an individual to get through in terms of the number of alerts and measuring performance against those goals. That's the way, or a way, that we will be monitoring the productivity of the folks that are performing in those remote locations.
Thanks, Steve. That's interesting. And you mentioned there about learning from the past. Kieran, can I ask you, what is a fundamentally critical issue impacting screening systems today?
So really, and to go back to Steve's point, the fact that we've been layering technologies to address the issues, that's really kind of fundamental, because ultimately the big issue is data quality. We have been layering technologies on top of almost in a kind of a band-aid fashion, without really addressing the underlying cause of a lot of these issues. For years we have seen a kind of a pervasive attitude amongst the industry of casting the net wide. Why do we cast the net wide? Because we know we haven't really necessarily got reliable information to go on, whether that be reliable information on the list, the regulatory enforcement side, or reliable information more often on our own internal side, our own client databases and things like that. And I think it's come to a point where you go back only a couple of years ago and AI and machine learning was very much thought of potentially as a silver bullet. Oh, this is the thing that's finally going to address the issue. But actually what we find out is it's just adding another layer of complexity. It's another tool, but it's another tool we've got to use with supervision and with understanding. Whereas if you start to actually address the underlying information you feed into these systems, through a variety of different methods, you can very easily start to take some good, well-informed, risk-based decisions about what cases you do and what cases you don't want to see, based on real information, not some kind of calculated algorithm.
That's interesting. Thanks for that. And staying with you, Kieran, what do you think is the best approach for dealing with data quality?
So I think the approach has to be somewhat tailored from organisation to organisation. You know, there's a lot of factors to take into account. But I think when it comes to compliance teams, one of the best things they can do is look for tools that can be within their scope and within their budgets. Traditionally, data quality is thought of as purely an enterprise-wide issue, whereby you know every single touch point of the customer and every single team involved in the entire business life cycle and relationship life cycle has to be involved in an effort to change or update the way they handle information. That's not necessarily true. A lot of the things that compliance teams actually need can be baked in using some intelligent data quality style tools to a compliance screening system. Whether you're just looking at simple kind of case deduplication, whether you're looking at, kind of looking beyond the first line and looking for embedded information that needs to be screened as well. That sort of intelligence can be within compliance's own application and their own ownership.
Thanks, Kieran. And it's interesting. We hear a lot about AI as a sort of bit of a buzzword, but let's get to a specific point. Maybe I could ask both of you this. How could AI actually help in PEP screening?
Thank you. I can take a stab at that. In terms of PEP screening, there is such a volume of information or data that one needs to cull through to establish whether or not, for example, the PEP has close associates. It's easier, obviously, to identify the PEP. There are many services out there that list the PEPs, but close associates are something that is a little bit harder to identify and could be changing much more frequently over time. So when one looks through the myriad of data sources, you start to really see how voluminous it can be, and to have to read through all of those articles, for example, to establish that there's a linkage between the PEP and a person can take an exorbitant amount of time. And when you start to think about, well, I'll arbitrarily limit my search to the first 10 articles that appear, that's not going to pass muster from a regulatory perspective and having a really good, sound risk-based approach to the process. So clearly AI would be well suited towards culling through all of this data and really being able to curate it and provide information back.
Yeah,
Thanks, Steve. Kieran.
Yeah, fine. I totally agree with what Steve's saying there. But me as a more technical person, I also see that there is a lot of underlying kind of intelligence that can be built into the actual matching process itself. So PEPs, as Steve quite rightly said, is a huge plethora of information to go on, and looking for well curated sources of information is good. But also being able to build in intelligence about handling of names in different languages, different regions, being able to apply kind of different matching tolerances depending on whether you're talking about domestic PEPs or foreign PEPs, PEPs and relatives and close associates of high grade versus much lower down the kind of the political chain. I think there's a lot of intelligence that can be built into those processes as well from a technical standpoint.
Thank you both. It is interesting that this reliability of the information is an important key in there. And looking at AI further for AML compliance, is it proven to reduce remediation output, or are these RegTech tools still in their infancy? Steve, perhaps you'd like to take that one.
Sure. Well, I think the answer is yes to both, quite frankly. Where AI has been implemented, there is a significant benefit in terms of the reduction, for example, in the number of false positives. But also, AI, as a general rule, is really in its infancy stages in terms of development. And there's so much more that can be explored and developed and implemented that the future is very exciting for it, and we're really only beginning to scratch the surface.
Thanks, Steve. That's great. It's really interesting that we're dealing well into the background of these RegTech tools rather than just the surface trend words that we hear a lot about. So thank you both for sharing your valuable insight with us today. And just as a note that Kieran will be joining the roundtable discussion after lunch today on how to reduce false positives in sanctions screening. And Steve will be looking at building a business case for sanctions technology alongside expert speakers from Citibank and Raiffeisen Bank in one of tomorrow morning's sessions. And I will be joining the global head of sanctions and financial crime at AXA and Beazley to look at potential dangers for insurers and what can happen if sanctions controls are weak. So thank you for joining us today, and we hope you'll join us for one of the sessions that we're involved with tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you all.